anytime you have a question or a thought or a comment, put it in the chat or just go off of mute. That's the advantage I find of Zoom. You can be gives a little more of that leeway than, in the temple, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya kind of atmosphere. And I think it's good to keep people's attention, so to speak, on a screen for an hour. And I hope this doesn't sound too self-aggrandizing. I thought I'd give you a little bit of detail about myself because I get the feeling, especially at the Bhakti Center, it's very much a community of devotees and similar, and I've been attending the classes and a lot of the same people every day. So just real briefly, and forgive me if, anyway, talking about myself during a Bhagavatam class. But I'm from New York. I'm from Long Island. Grew up in Great Neck, the same town as Rameshwar Prabhu, just down the street from Yogeshwar Prabhu and Mukhya Devi, who's the temple president in Alachua. She's from Roslyn. Bindu Madhava Prabhu is from Long Island. Burijan Prabhu also, then grew up in Brooklyn. So a lot of devotees came from Long Island, especially in the earlier days. And I went to college in Ann Arbor in Michigan, and I did what people did in the 70s. I dropped out of school and became a brahmachari. And I was a brahmachari in the Detroit temple for 12 years, mainly doing book distribution and fundraising. And then I met the person who would be my future wife, and that was the end of being a brahmachari. Pretty much, so that's how it happens. My wife is from Ireland. She's actually not like she's from Boston. She's actually from Ireland. And right after we got married, we both got services in Vrindavan, and we lived in Vrindavan for 21 years. My son was born and raised in Vrindavan, and I was doing two things. I was helping to run the Vrindavan Institute for Higher Education, and also working with the Supreme Court there, training judges and lawyers in my field, which is conflict resolution. And so my wife is kind of like a leadership kind of person. She became the principal of the Vrindavan Gurukula. And if any of you have some familiarity with that, had a bit of a checkered past, and her job was to kind of bring it to a different level, which I think she did successfully. And then she was offered to be the temple president here in Washington, DC, a beautiful temple that we have here on 12 acres of land. And so we've lived here in Washington for the last 11 years. I work for the federal government. I work with Native Americans primarily. Before the pandemic, I'd spend more than half my time on reservations, trying to have help heal conflicts between Native Americans and the federal government. And that's what I do. One other thing, a little plug here. I'm part of a project with Sachinandan Maharaj and Burijan Prabhu, and it's almost finished. It's a retreat center at Govardhan Hill in Vrindavan, the holiest of holy places, that houses 240 devotees. And we'd love to have you visit Govardhan and bring a group of devotees with you. It'll be a fully functioning retreat center. Also, if you want to really get absorbed in your devotional life, there's in the back of the property, there's 6 solitary bhajan kutirs where you just go to chant Hare Krishna and read Prabhupada's books, nothing else. You can't bring your phone, you can't bring a computer, and it's just for total absorption. And there's 6 of those. So Adi Purush, we have a place for you there. Hare Krishna. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So I'll share my screen and show you the shloka for today. Okay, it's an interesting one. So I'll do the Sanskrit one time. Mataram Pitaram Bratrin Sarvams Cha Suridas Tata Ganti Ya Sutripo Lubdha Rajana Prayaso Bhuvi. And you can see the word for word there. Mataram means mother, and Pitaram means father. Bratrin means unto brothers. By the way, now that I'm looking at Pitaram, it reminds, that's because my son was born in India. He calls me Pita. And I did want to add, so my son has done some service at the Bhakti Center. He's a organizational development consultant, and he was working with the Bhakti Center for a couple of years and loved working with the board of trustees there. And I've always had a desire to do service in New York. That's always, because, Boma Ijadi, there's a verse that says that if you're really in Maya, you think the place of birth is worshipable. In this case, of course, it is, because Prabhupada went to New York, and that was his destination. But I've always wanted to do service in New York, so I'm so grateful for the opportunity to give this class today and connect with my country of origin, so to speak. But with the devotees from there is the real thing. And my first connection was with, I got to see Srila Prabhupada in 1976 at New York Rath Yatra. So that was my first connection with devotees. And my wife also, 1982, her first connection with devotees was New York Rath Yatra. She was just fresh off the boat from Ireland, and she met this great soul, Mahendrani Devi. And I don't know if any of you know Mahendrani, she's a great devotee. And she met my wife, and this was pre-email, pre-everything, and started sending her prasadam through the mail. And my wife she won my wife's heart. My wife became a devotee because of Mahendrani at New York Rath Yatra. So, okay. Sarvancha means and anyone else. Surida, that's, and I think we heard a class recently about the different words for friendship. And so the closest, the most intimate, one of the most intimate words is Surida. There's also Bandhu and others. Tata means as well as. Gyati means they kill, as it is practically seen. And we're talking here about Kamsa. He indeed. Asutripa means those who envy the lives of others for their personal sense gratification. Lubdha means greedy. Rajana means such kings. Prayasha, almost always. And Bhuvi is a name for Bhumi, or is another derivation of Bhumi, or the earth. So, translation. Kings. Oh, wait, I stopped sharing my screen, right? Sorry. Oops. There we go. You're all so polite, you didn't say anything to me. Kings greedy for sense gratification on this earth almost always kill their enemies indiscriminately. To satisfy their own whims, they may kill anyone, even their mothers, fathers, brothers, or friends. So Srila Prabhupada's comments. We have seen in the history of India that Aurangzeb killed his brothers and nephews and imprisoned his father to fulfill political ambitions. There have been many such instances, and Kamsa was the same type of king. Now, if you make any connection to current events, that's wouldn't be a surprise. Kamsa did not hesitate to kill his nephews and imprison his sister and his father. For demons to do such things is not astonishing. Nonetheless, although Kamsa was a demon, he was aware that Lord Vishnu cannot be killed, and thus he attained salvation. Even partial understanding of the activities of Lord Vishnu makes one eligible for salvation. So just to appease you, if you're wondering, like, well, maybe I should just become a demon. Salvation in this sense, Prabhupada says in the 7th canto that the salvation he got was merging into the impersonal Brahman. He didn't develop immediately his love for Krishna. So we don't want to exactly follow in Kamsa's footsteps. Kamsa knew a little about Krishna, that he could not be killed, and therefore he attained salvation, although he thought of Vishnu, Krishna, as an enemy. Now here comes the inspiring part. What then is to be said of one who knows Krishna perfectly from descriptions of Shastras like Bhagavad-Gita? It is therefore the duty of everyone to read Bhagavad-Gita and understand Krishna perfectly. This will make one's life successful. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Panchakalpa Tarubhyas Chakripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay.
Raj Vihari Prabhu.
Yes.
Did Srila Prabhupada refer to the type of liberation that Kamsa got as spiritual suicide? Impersonal liberation?
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, we're not on his program. That's right. Yes, the specific. I found it. It's a very, very famous verse. Canto 7, Chapter 1, verse 31. For reasons that we won't go into in this class, but it's the verse that is presented by Rupa Goswami to describe Raganuga Bhakti, actually. And but in the purport, Prabhupada writes that Kamsa and other enemies of Krishna merged into the existence of Brahman. But why should Krishna's friends and devotees have the same position? Krishna's devotees attain the association of the Lord as his constant companions, either in Vrindavan or in the Vaikuntha planets. So you're right. You're right, Prabhuji. If you compare the two, it's like, why would I want to just like impersonal Brahman? And often people in the impersonal Brahman, they ultimately start hankering for some rasa, some relationship, and they come down again to this realm. Whereas, once you're back with Krishna, as they say in Brooklyn, forget about it, right? You don't want to come back to.
There's no jokes. There's no prasadam by mail.
Yeah, there's no prasadam.
There's nothing there.
Right, exactly. There's no sankirtan in Brahman, right? There's no bhajans, there's no kirtan, there's no exactly. Radha Murlidhar, there's no Radha Murlidhar there. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Aurangzeb, who's mentioned here. Well, Prabhupada tells a story about him, and it's instructive, and it's connected to, well, of course, he's mentioned in the purport, but it's also connected to those last two sentences, which are really inspiring for us about understanding the Bhagavad-Gita. So Prabhupada tells a story about a man named D.L. Raya, and he was a great dramatist. He was a person who wrote dramas. And he wrote a book called Shah Jahan. Now, anyone knows the history. Shah Jahan was the father of Aurangzeb, and he's the one who constructed the Taj Mahal. It was a tribute to his wife, who passed away at a relatively young age. So he called the book Shah Jahan. Now, the book, it's all about Aurangzeb, right? He killed his elder brother. He killed his younger brother. He arrested his father and put him in the fort in Delhi, and he manipulated things, and it was all about him being a politician, and the activities it's all about Aurangzeb. So Prabhupada he tells this story that a friend of D.L. Roy asked him, Mr. Roy, you've written this book. The book is full of activities about Aurangzeb. Why have you made the hero Shah Jahan? Why have you named the book Shah Jahan? He's in the background. He's an old man arrested actually not in Delhi, in Agra, in the fort of Agra. He's sitting there. He's not doing much. Why have you named it Shah Jahan? So Mr. Roy, he replied, said, yes, I purposely named this book Shah Jahan because actually the hero is Shah Jahan. And so the friend says, why? And he replies that because the whole activities was being done by Aurangzeb, but the effect was being enjoyed and suffered by Shah Jahan. He was the father. He could not tolerate that his eldest brother was, that his eldest son was killed, his youngest son was killed, he was arrested. So he was the one suffering. He was actually the focus. So what does that have to do with class today? Prabhupada then goes on to say, you can't speculate about the purpose of the author of a book. You have to ask him, you have to understand his purpose, right? And so he was saying Mr. Roy's purpose was to glorify Shah Jahan and not to all, and it wasn't just all about Aurangzeb, and that's why he named the book. So similarly, we don't need to, Prabhupada would call he calls his Bhagavad Gita as it is. Right? In Sanskrit, it's Bhagavad-Gita Yatha, which means as it is, and doesn't need any, fancy interpretations. Take Krishna's words as they are. Learn from the author himself what was his purpose, right? And so that connects very much with this purport, right? Where we hear that when it is to be said that one who knows Krishna perfectly from description, what then is to be said of one who knows Krishna perfectly from descriptions of Shastra like Bhagavad-Gita? It is therefore the duty of everyone to read Bhagavad-Gita and understand Krishna perfectly. So we can understand Krishna perfectly. At least we can understand Krishna to a great extent by reading Bhagavad-Gita. Of course, we learn much more about him in the Srimad Bhagavatam, especially the culmination of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the 10th canto, where we hear Krishna's, intimate relationships with his most wonderful devotees. Yes, Andrea, Bhagavad-Gita, there's an H there, I think, Yatha, is Bhagavad-Gita as it is. That's correct, right? Yes, thank you for that. So I assume that many of us on this call have read Bhagavad-Gita maybe many times and have some inspiration. So what I wanted to ask you is, well, actually, before I do that, let's just talk about something that comes up a lot when we talk about Bhagavad-Gita and knowing Krishna through the Bhagavad-Gita. And that is, I'll put it up on my screen, very famous verse that devotees sometimes scratch their heads about in order, because they want to kind of understand it clearly. And it's a famous verse, Janma karma tame divyam evam yo veti tatata. Tattva deham punar janma, no more birth. Punar janma naiti, no more birth. Naiti mam eti sorjuna. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. So the question always comes up, well, what does it mean to know the transcendental nature of Krishna's appearance and activities? And someone says, well, I've read the first 2 chapters of the 10th canto about Krishna's appearance. I've read the whole Krishna book. I've read the whole 10th canto. So is that good enough? Right? I'm sure many of us have either had that question or heard that question in a class. And I think the one way to answer that, and one of my favorite ways to answer that, is to read the next verse in the Gita. So let's go back to that. And it's also an amazing verse and an equally amazing purport, which we probably won't get into, but I really recommend you read the Srila Prabhupada's purport to chapter 4, verse 10. It has so much insight into why we fear taking shelter of Krishna. So this verse, Vita Raga Bhaya Krodha Manmaya Mam Upasrita Bhavo Jnana Tapasa Puta Madbhavam Agataha. So we heard that with last one, if we know Krishna's appearance and activities, we go back to Godhead because we get that knowledge of him. So now look at the relationship between knowledge and love. Being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed, or as they say in Long Island, absorbed, being fully absorbed in me and taking shelter in me, many, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me. Okay, so they became purified by knowledge. And then what's next? and thus they all attain transcendental love for me. Now, unfortunately, my mind is a little bit like a 1960s and early 70s jukebox. So it reminds me of this song, but we can really easily relate it to this verse. There's a song that's been copied many, many times by many, many singers over the years, even in recent years. But what the line is, and Henry will know this song, he's old enough to know this song. To know him is to love, love, love him. And I think we can easily relate that to Krishna. And that verse 10 of chapter 4, really brings that out, right? That they train transcendental knowledge of Krishna, and then they all trained love for Krishna. So my question to you then, and I'd like this to either you go off of mute or put it in the chat, what are some verses in the Gita that at least for you help you on this path of understanding Krishna perfectly? What are some verses that you really find inspiring that give you some insight into Krishna, the person Krishna, and thus, as the years go on, help you develop that love for Krishna?
Hare Krishna, Raja
Hare
Vihari.
Krishna. Hare Krishna, Andrea.
I'm so glad that I was able to feel better and attend this class in person, because your energy is so is just infectious and in a good way. And I really did appreciate you giving the bio at the beginning, because as you said, it especially if you're not like super well known, it helps, but also you gave such personal information that it feels like now we really know you. Mm-hmm. So it's that, and again, I feel like that's the whole thing with Krishna. It's that radical personalism.
Right.
That we get to know him, then we can learn to love him. So it's the same with his devotees. But the verse that I always go to, which is 9:26.
9:26. It's on my list. Very good.
If no one offers me with love and devotion a leaf, a flower, a fruit, or water, I will accept it. I was translating from Spanish because I wrote it down in Spanish, because Spanish is actually technically my first language, and I felt like I needed to write it in that language to kind of really sense that love that I sense behind it. And it's definitely my go-to, like when I'm really ill and I don't feel like I can comprehend too much scripture, that's the verse that I always want to read, because that's the one that really kind of resonates in my heart, in the sense of how much Krishna loves us, that he's willing to accept just the smallest bit of offering, as long as it's done with love and devotion.
That's wonderful. And if you look, I have it on the screen. If you look at it, the word bhakti is mentioned twice, okay, in the second and third line. That's significant. And so Krishna doesn't exactly taste our Goranga potatoes, although he probably really likes those, or gulab. We had Bindu Madhava Prabhu yesterday, who was like a total prasad bhakta. We're old friends. But he asnami, you see that word asnami? He accepts it when it's offered with bhakti. And so even a devotee by mistake in ecstasy offers him the banana peel instead of the banana. Not that we should do that. He accepts it because it's offered with love. And as you said, and also in Sanskrit, the patram, the pushpam, and the phalam, those are all in the singular. So Krishna's even a leaf, a flower, a fruit. So Prabhupada would say even the poorest person can usually find something, at least a leaf, right? You know, and Krishna will asnami. He will accept it if we have bhakti. So thank you so much, Andrea, for that verse. That's the greatest hit. Yes, and by the way, a little technical, but that verse is described as the perfect explanation of bhakti. So Krishna is saying, "This is what I want," and the devotee says, "Yes, I'll give it." The next verse, which Prabhupada often quoted a lot, actually is. It's also a wonderful, wonderful verse. It has a little bit of the karma yoga in it. Yat karosi, yat asnasi, yat johosi, dadasi, yat pasasi, konteya, tat kuru samararpanam. That whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer or give away, whatever austerities you perform, do that, O son of Kunti, as an offering to me. This is just a little lower than the last verse because you're already going to do something and now offer it to Krishna. Whereas the verse before that is Krishna says, this is what I want, and the devotee says, yes, sir. So it's just a subtle differences. Oh, okay. Thank you, Priti. 529. Yes. The peace formula, which obviously in my service is it's a big one. So let's look at 529. Such a beautiful verse. Okay, whoops. Well, there we go. Bhoktaram yagatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suridham sarvabhutanam gyapvamam, one who knows these things. Gyapa means to know. Shantim, they attain peace. A person in full consciousness of me. And then Prabhupada would say, these are the three ways that you can attain peace. So we're all looking for, making advancement in Krishna consciousness. So if we just can meditate on these three things, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities. That means we do through the day, we try to offer our life to Krishna. My wife grew up in a typical Irish family, 8 children, and her mom was a devout Catholic. And whenever they had to do chores in the house and the kids didn't want to do it, her mother would say, offer it up, offer it up. So she was trained, so offer up our life to Krishna. And then the Supreme Lord of all planets and demigods, that everything belongs to him, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. We come into this world with nothing. We leave the world with nothing. And in the middle, we think we own so many things. But really, Krishna's he's the owner of everything. And the most important part, perhaps, of this, he is the best friend. And again, this word, remember in the verse that we studied today, had the word surit. So here also, suridham, most intimate kind of friendship. So he's the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities. So even when we're going through some struggles in life, we can remember that Krishna's our well-wisher. Then Gyatramam Shantim Richati, we attain peace from the pangs of material miseries. So thank you so much, Priti, for that. Yes. Other shlokas. You guys are slinging some great shlokas here that really inspire you in the Gita.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. This is another verse.
Hey, Gail.
Hey.
Nice to hear your voice.
Thank you. Yeah, I also liked one from, do like one from chapter 9. But those who worship me, who always worship me,
I know what you're going to say.
With exclusive devotion, huh?
922?
Yes.
Go ahead, say it.
But those who always worship me with exclusive devotion, meditating on my transcendental form, to them I carry what they lack and I preserve what they have. And I like this one because, when I think of this verse, I think of somebody giving someone else a leg up. They can't, or like a child wants the candy that's on top of the refrigerator. There's no way in the world that they can do it on their own. So they're going to need mommy's help, but because mommy sees how much they're trying, mommy actually gets the candy for them. She makes up for what they lack,
How nice, Gail. How nice. Yes. Yeah. And there is, Gail, I'm so glad you brought up this verse because there's a beautiful story behind this verse. And I think I'll tell it briefly. I won't telling the whole story may be a little long. But if you see this verse here, you see these words, Yoga Shemam, right?
Yes.
And Prabhupada translates that as, here it says requirements, protection. But he says, oh no, I'm sorry, the wrong words. Aham Yaham. He says, Krishna is pointing to his chest and says, I personally carry what they lack, preserve what they have. So there was a great acharya, his name is Arjuna Acharya, and he was writing a tika, a commentary on this verse. And he was a little like, vaham yaham. I mean, his experience was Krishna doesn't personally do it. He arranges it for it to get done. He does love his devotees, but he arranges for it to get done. So he actually takes his pen and with 2 lines crosses out Baham Yaham and puts in Karomi, which means I arrange. So then he, so he tells his wife, he says, Devi, I'm going now to the river to take my bath, and please, please make the offering, and I'll come and take prasadam when I'm done. So he goes out, and there's a knock on the door, and Arjuna Acharya's wife comes to the door, and she sees these 2 beautiful young boys. I know a lot of you know this story, right? These 2, I know Henry knows it. These 2 beautiful young boys, one very darkish complexion and one white like color of milk, and they say, Mataji, here we've come. Here's they have like, how you have like a stick with 2 bags on either side full of things. So it was full of vegetables and ghee and dahi and yogurt and all kinds of preparations to make a great meal. So here, please take this. And they were kind of like in a rush. And she said, please come in. And she saw there's such beautiful young boys. And they said, no, Mataji, we can't stay, but we wanted to please give this to you. We have to leave before your husband comes back. And she's like, why? My husband would love to meet you. He said, no, we met him before, and he chastised us, and he even beat us. And she said, my husband is this wonderful Brahmana. He would never do that to anyone. And the darker complexioned boy, lifted up his kurta and showed 2 lines that, of beating on the back of his, on his back. And so they disappeared. And she was so disturbed. She was like, how could my son my husband do this? So she broke all cultural norms. She cooked everything, offered it to Krishna, and then she started eating before her husband came back, which is, not the traditional culture. So Arjuna Acharya comes back and he says, Devi, what's gotten into you? And she says, what's gotten into you? How could you have done this? And he said, what? I just went to take my bath. How could you have, chastised these beautiful young boys? And he said, I didn't meet any young boys. And she said, no. And she starts describing him, and it starts to dawn upon him. And he says, could you describe them a little? Well, one was carrying a flute, and the other one had a plow. And he goes, oh my God, right? And he realized that Krishna and Balaram came to his door to prove that it wasn't that they arrange to preserve what you have and carry what they personally come and preserve what we have and carry what we lack. So Gail, thank you so much for that, telling us of that beautiful shloka.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you for the story.
Yeah. So Krishna personally does that. So how much cooler is that than going into the impersonal Brahman? Okay, Radhika has put 7.4. Yes, this gives us a real insight into Krishna. Let me pull that up real quick. Oops. 7.4. Daivi hiesha gunamayi. 7.14 rather. Mama maya duratyaya. Mamevaye prapadyante. Mayam etam tarantite. So yeah, I'm really glad you brought this up, Radhika, because it really gives us insight. Krishna says, and it's almost contradictory, right? He says, Daivi hiesha gunamayami. It's so difficult to get out of the modes of material nature. Duratyaya, it's very, very difficult. And then he says, no, it's easy. Right? He said, Mam eva ye prapadyante, one who surrenders prapadyante certainly Eva, mum unto me, then they can easily overcome it. Prabhupada translates, this divine energy of mine consisting of the three modes of material nature is difficult to overcome, but those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. So really impossible, practically speaking, and really easy. And that gives us some real insight into Krishna, how, like the last verse that Gail gave us, that he preserves what we have, he helps us. You know, Prabhupada was so loved to say, and maybe Adi Purusha, I don't remember if it's 100 or 1,000 or 10,000. I've heard different devotees say things, but we take one step towards Krishna, and he takes, whether it's 100, 1,000, 10,000. I've heard different things. Maybe Adi, you've heard some things. He takes a lot of steps to us.
And he takes very big steps.
Yeah, and if he, like in his form as a Trivikrama, he takes very big steps. So yeah, so Krishna's really there to help us. So thank you, Radhika. That's such it gives us such an insight into how Krishna helps his devotees, that verse. Beautiful.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Similar to that, for me, this verse is a favorite just because it's the recognition, like you said, that this energy belongs to Krishna. It's his energy, and we need his help to cross it. Like, that recognition is so real, and sometimes it hits so hard. But then it's his sweetness that more than we would ever want it, he's willing and he's wanting so much to help us easily cross it, more than we can ever imagine.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And I really like the word willing. And the other side of that, he's able. You know, one of the really nice ways to meditate on Krishna is, that I've heard from authorities, is that he's all powerful and he's all loving. That combination. So, like, in other words, if somebody was all powerful but not all loving, you know, gosh, if they have a bad hair day, we're in trouble, right? And if someone is all loving but not all powerful, they'd be great association, but they may not be able to help us so much. But that combination of Bhakta Vatsal, that Krishna loves his devotees, and that he can, like you said, Radhika, you're quoting this verse, he can actually do something. If we take shelter of him, he can help us cross beyond something that's impossible to cross. So it's a wonderful way to think of Krishna, to meditate on Krishna, that he's all powerful and all loving.
An important part of that verse is that he's all powerful, he's all loving, and we're supposed to do what he wants. Because sometimes we can appreciate, okay, he's all powerful, he's all loving, but I want it like this. And then we get hung up, you know. Get dragged along.
You mentioned that in class the other day.
Yeah, we get dragged along screaming rather than, you know, surrendering willingly and grateful for
whatever Krishna sends. Right. Yeah, you mentioned that in class in regards to your trip to Taiwan. Your service in Taiwan, and Tamal Krishna was China. No, leave China. And Prabhupada did not let him off the hook. Okay. So I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Angil takes us back to the second chapter. So this is so we actually no need for me to share the screen. Nainam chidanti sastrani, nainam dahati pavaka, vachaivam kledayantyapo, nasoshayanti marita. Marital? I didn't remember the L at the end of that, but okay. The soul can never be cut into pieces by any weapon, nor can it be burned by fire, nor moistened by water, nor withered by the wind. Yes, so these verses from verse 11 to 30 of the second chapter of the Gita, Krishna is giving us gyan. He's giving us an understanding of the soul and who we are. And this is an important verse because Arjuna had these weapons. He had a weapon. He had the fire weapon. He had a water weapon, right? There was a wind weapon, but Krishna said those weapons aren't going to touch the soul. There was a very targeted verse a warrior who had these kind of weapons and telling him again, forget about it. You're not going to be able to destroy a soul, the jiva, by any of your great weapons that you may even be, kind of proud of. So the soul can't be wet. So Angel, how is that inspiring to you that the soul can't get wet? Would you like to go?
So I'm one of these people that really appreciates amusement. And so when I'm reading this, every time I read it, I can't help smiling and laughing to think about my soul essence getting wet. It's impossible, but I just imagine this little like rain cloud, but it's getting rained on. Like it just, the imagery that it gives me like makes me stop and like really want to take in the rest of the information that's there because of the delight that it gives me in amusement.
How nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to think about that sometimes during the rainy season in Vrindavan when we'd have some incredible monsoons. And okay, well, my house can get pretty wet, but I can't. So thank you for
right, that. Exactly. Or my physical body can get wet, but this obviously isn't my soul. It gives my brain something to pleasantly chew on.
Yeah, thank you for that. Okay, now Jacqueline has. Someone saying something?
Yeah. I wanted to share my realization about the soul not getting wet. I was thinking that Krishna's steps are big, and sometimes it may seem as though he's taken stuff from us, like Trivikram. He took everything. And Krishna's steps sometimes they may be like that. Krishna is taken. And then, but the soul can get wet, so have no fear. Don't wet your pants. Krishna's working in your life.
Yes.
Just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Yeah, Prabhupada said that Krishna has a form with 10 hands, so if he wants to give you something, you can't stop him. And if he wants to take something, you can't stop him. By the way, I always get jealous of you, Prabhu, as I see you walking the streets of New York, because that was like one of my favorite pastimes. And Burijan Prabhu, he would love to go. He would be in his dhoti and kurta and just go around all day. He's a photographer and take pictures and then use them in presentations. So
there's all kinds of characters, people talking to themselves, yelling, screaming. It's there.
Yeah, I get a little homesick when I see you walking. Okay, so Jacqueline has put one of the most famous verses. There's so many. 934, and this. Let's put that in the. Let's see. Give me a second here. 934, which I believe is Manmana Bhava Mad Bhakto. Oops, come on. There we go. Yep. Madhyajimam namaskru, mame vaisasi yuktaivam atmanam mat prayanaha. Let me show you that. And this verse is so important that practically the identical verse is repeated in verse 65 of the 18th chapter, almost identical. And the meaning is identical. Engage your mind in always thinking of me, become my devotee, offer obeisances to me, and worship me. Being completely absorbed in me, surely you will come to me. And Prabhupada would say, you just have to do these 4 things and life is good. You're a devotee. And the whole essence of sadhana, we're doing these practices, hearing the Bhagavatam, chanting Hare Krishna, taking prasadam. The whole essence is smarta vyasatatam Vishnu. To always remember Krishna. The way I remember that verse, because it begins smartavya. So if you're smart, you'll remember Krishna. Smartavya satatam Vishnu. It's a very beautiful verse because then the next line says, Vismartavya najatuche. Don't forget him. And then he says all the details. Sarva vidhi nisedhashur etayar evakim kram. All the details. Putting on tilak, wearing a sari, dhoti, or doing achman, and all of the details of bhakti. They're kinkaras, they're servants of this principle. So they're important because they help us remember Krishna always and not forget him. So thank you so much, Jacqueline. That's a beautiful verse. Yes, Radhika, that verse does target Arjuna's weapons.
maybe you could tell me where this verse comes from. I've heard Vaishya Sheikh Babu say this. He always says, we must fortify our intelligence with the Shastra. And he says, if we don't hear sufficiently from Shastra, we begin to imagine injustices. And that statement has been rattling around in our conversation for the last few days. Where is that from exactly? If we don't hear sufficiently from Shastra, we begin to imagine injustices. So I find myself imagining injustices. And I know that's a little red flag, you know. We got to get back and get fortified.
Well,
Do you know that verse?
I can't read, you know, what do they say? Vaishnavera Kriya Mudra. Don't try to understand the mind of a great Vaishnava like Vaisheshika Prabhu. But one possible explanation is Canto 10, Chapter 14, verse 8, which Prabhupada said should be the guide for all devotees. Now, he's only said that about one verse. So if you want to memorize a verse or learn a verse, 10, 14, 8, a little dyslexic there. But I'm not going to quote it there. I'm going to show it to you in the Nectar of Devotion, because that's where Prabhupada said it should be the guide for all devotees. So give me a second here. Nectar of Devotion, it's chapter 10, and it's under the expecting the Lord's mercy. Okay, so let's go there. So in the 10th, can you see, as you can see, I highlighted all of this. In the 10th canto, 14th chapter, verse 8, it is said, "My dear Lord, any person who is constantly awaiting your causeless mercy to be bestowed upon him, and who goes on suffering the resultant actions of his past misdeeds." So there's the injustice, right? Oh yeah, why am I going through all this stuff? I didn't deserve this, or someone else. Oh, but that person who, when they're going through that, what do? They offer respectful obeisances from the core of their hearts. And the actual, you know, this is paraphrasing, but in the translation, it's with your heart, your words, and your mind. And if you do that, you automatically inherit the kingdom of God. You automatically go back to, it's your rightful claim. The Sanskrit is daya bhak, which in traditional Hindu culture, the eldest son, when the father passes away, the eldest son just automatically inherits the debts or the wealth of the father. It was just a given. It was automatic. So that example is given. So automatically someone goes back to Godhead if they develop this, that there's so much remembering Krishna and they're constantly awaiting his mercy to be bestowed upon us. And when things happen to us that don't seem like fun, we say, oh, you know, it could have been a lot worse. This is the way Prabhupada would explain it. But Krishna has minimized it. And so instead of blaming Krishna, we it's an impetus to remember him. And that person who reacts to challenges in life in that way, their envy of Krishna is gone. And so when the envy is gone, then what's left except to be returned to Krishna's abode? So, and therefore, you see in the next paragraph, this statement of Srimad Bhagavatam should be the guide for all devotees. A devotee should not expect immediate relief from the reactions of his past misdeeds. No conditioned soul is free from such reactionary experiences. And he goes on. And it's a beautiful, if you can read it, it's the 10th chapter of the Nectar of Devotion, under expecting the Lord's mercy. But it is such an important verse because it really cuts away at our whole material existence, because as conditioned souls, we tend to take credit when things go well and blame God when things don't go well, you know. And a devotee is the opposite. When things don't go well, thank you so much, Krishna. And when things go well, he says this in the 2nd chapter of the Gita, the devotee thanks the Lord that he's made it easier for him or her to do their service. So it's like Srila Prabhupada would say that a good business person makes money when the market is up and when the market is down, right? When the market is down, you sell stocks short. Market is up, you buy stocks and they go up. So in happiness or distress, the devotee finds a way to make spiritual advancement. That might be what he was referring to, Adi Pushpa.
That one.
Yeah.
But you're saying if you don't hear sufficiently, you begin to imagine injustices. So
Yes.
you're seeing it differently, but it's based on hearing from scripture.
Yes.
You become fixed and seeing it properly.
Yes. You get to see that vision, that vision, right? And that, he may have been referring to the first canto, chapter 2 of the Gita, Shrimvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Shavana Kirtana Hridyantak Shtohi Abhadrani Vidanote, that by hearing and chanting regularly, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, Nitya means eternally, but also means regularly, almost all the impurities in the heart, they fly away. So that might have been a good question to ask him. Let's see. Yes, Andrea, radical personalism. Isn't that beautiful? Radical personalism. Yeah. Did I miss anything here? Let's see. Radhika says, not in a reference to a particular verse, but a reflection. Krishna and Prabhupada's personal nature are so apparent in the Gita. I'm thinking of those times when I've been in anxiety, needed advice or a divine signal. And the exact thing I needed to hear, not necessarily what I want to hear, is on the page of the Bhagavad Gita that randomly opened. How many have had that experience in life? So many of us. It's incredible. Incredible. Yeah. Thank you, Radhika. Andrea. Oh, I love doing that, Radhika. When I'm ill or in pain, I always randomly open the Gita and read the verse. Wonderful. Anand says, sorry, I can't unmute now, but I like Bhagavad Gita 5:12. Interesting. The steadily devoted soul attains unadulterated peace because he offers the results of all activities to me. Whereas the person who is not in union with the divine, who is greedy for the fruits of his labor, becomes entangled. Yes. So I think sometimes I struggled for years trying to figure out what Prabhupada meant by the word fruitive. It's like, what? Fruitive activities, fruitive results. I think I got a little better grip now after 40 some odd years, but the fruitive mentality is we're doing something, but the real focus is the fruit, right? The result. I'm doing this job. I don't like this job. I'm working in a factory, but at least I get the fruit and I can, pay the rent, or I can party on the weekends or whatever, right? So they're thinking of the future and the fruit. A devotee actually finds the activity itself a pleasurable thing, and the so-called result of fruit, that's up to Krishna. They leave the result to Krishna, but their focus is in the present. It's kind of like the original practice of mindfulness. Mindfulness is so popular today, but the Adi mindfulness was, Krishna says, na soshati na kanchati. Don't lament about the past, hanker for the future. So Krishna was way ahead of be here now, or the power of now. To be here now was my generation. Power of now is the present generation. Eckhart Tolle. But Krishna was way ahead of the game. So thank you for that, Anand. And Andrea, radical personalism. Yes, I think many of you know Rukmini Devi, and I think it's either her or Rambaru Devi who quoted who came up with that saying, radical personalism. Dana Kriya says, Prabhu says, such a beautiful verse. I'm not sure. Oh, probably Tatenu Kampam. I've always appreciated Kalakanta Prabhu's poetic translation of it. A person who anticipates your mercy, all the while persisting in the face of every obstacle and trial, while offering respects to you within his very core, obtains a claim to your domain and love forevermore. Yes. Kalakanta is quite the poet. He has sometimes even talked me into being part of his blind uncle band, and even had me dress in drag once and put on a gopi skirt and be his wife in in the songs of Alachua. That was, yeah. But yes, great. Jacqueline says, beautiful, you are always in Lord's mercy. And Angelica, did I pronounce your name right? 1715. I would like to share something inspired by what you spoke earlier. Please share.
Thank you. So should I recite the verse first?
Yeah, yes, please. Do you want me to post it also? Go ahead, start it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, why not? Pull it up. I have it pulled up already. Sanskrit and translation, or only translation?
Whatever you like. You have the floor. It's your mic.
Okay, I guess Sanskrit is very important. Anudvega karam vakyam satyam priya hitam chayat svadhyaya vyasanam chaiva valmayam tapa uchyate. Translation. Austerity of speech consists in speaking words that are truthful, pleasing, beneficial, and not agitating to others, and also in regularly reciting Vedic literature. So that's one of my favorite verses.
Thank you.
I just really love it. And also I just wanted to add, because you mentioned that your wife is Irish and her Catholic upbringing, which is also my upbringing, and I was just reflecting yesterday, because yesterday was Ash Wednesday, which essentially begins a whole 40-day period of Lent and fasting and taking on austerity to prepare for Easter and coming of Christ. And I was just thinking how wonderful it is that actually we in our Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition are preparing for Gora Purnim, and at the same time we're, some of us are also preparing for coming of Christ, and that's there are so many wonderful teachers which are coming and sharing the love of God.
So we want to know what austerities you're going to perform for Lent.
Well, one that I was raised with is that during Lent I only eat once a day, and also I'm trying to prepare austerity of speech, really not to rant and not to speak nonsense as much as I do usually. So that has been also a new one for this 40 days. We'll see how much I can keep it. But
very good. Thank you for that. Yeah, I was more into Mardi Gras than Lent, but for a purpose. I would go there to do Sankirtan in New Orleans and distribute books. So that was how.
Well,
Go on.
Hi. Now I work with Ali here in the food distribution. I'm his servant here. And I just wanted to say what Angelique was saying about speaking, truthfully but pleasing to others. That becomes a problem because sometimes speaking the truth might not be what people want to hear. So I'm just saying that has a little issues over there. How can you speak a truth and at the same time always be pleasing to others? I don't see how that's possible.
Shh, quiet.
Well, that's a whole topic maybe for the next class, because and it's kind of connected to my service in conflict resolution. Yes. So yeah, there's so much to be said about that question.
Well, that's probably a whole session.
Yeah, it's a great question, Prabhu. It's really brilliant because it brings back. So Andrea said a feedback sandwich. You say something, the feedback sandwich. You say something that you noticed in the person that is good, and then you give them, some stern room for improvement, and then you end with something positive. And the idea behind that is it's a little easier on the ego, and then you can actually hear the chastisement or the they can hear it better, because you're not saying that everything about them is useless, but you're saying this, yes. I think I'll just give this one thing, and it's really we're past time. It starts with checking our own heart and make sure that our strong words or our chastisement is coming from a place of helping the person and not out of ego or the lower modes of material nature. But that's only a start, and we will talk about that. I really want to respect your time, so thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I'm really grateful to the Bhakti Center for allowing me to have your association today and talk about Bhagavad-Gita as it is, and about Aurangzeb in the right way. Hare Krishna. Vanchakalpa tarubhyas chakrika sindhubhya titanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.
Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Raja Vihari Shastra Gem Ki Jai. Thank you everyone for engaging in this discussion. This is the true Srimad Bhagavatam. Raja Vihari Prabhu is our sage, and we're asking pertinent questions, getting bona fide answers, Shastra based. Nice, realized. Thank you very much, Raja Vihari Prabhu.
Thank
You
you.
charged us. You charged my battery for the whole day.
Good. Have
So
a
we
good
look
day.
forward
Hare
to
Krishna.
seeing everybody tomorrow. Hare Krishna.